attended council hearings in person. You tuned into our televised proceedings on Channel 13. Now you have the chance to listen to us on the radio as we demystify our work and the people who do it. This is not a council. This is Hearing the Council with your host, Josh Gibson.
Thank you, deep voice person with a funky backbeat. Indeed, this is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council. You can't have a government without a council, so you can't have a government radio station without a council show. This is it. I'm Josh Gibson, Director of Communications for the Council. You may also know me as our voice on social media at Council of DC. And we are once again honored to have Ward 1 Council member Brianne Nadeau, our most frequent customer, with us here. I picture one of those stamp punch cards you get at the bagel place, you know, and when you like hit a certain number of interviews, you get a free thing. And I have to figure out what you get because you're certainly a dedicated customer.
Yeah, I'd like to redeem, please.
Yeah, I'm super honored, and I need to think of that real fast. Maybe a T-shirt, thing like that. Dig into the council's merch closet and get you some sort of insignia mug. Or
wait. We have a merch closet?
We do have a merch. I probably am going to get in huge trouble for disclosing that, but yes, and also vintage merch, like discontinued stuff. Like, you know, I love eBay, and like I would just go to town if I could just, you know, clear out the merch closet with vintage items. But anyway, I will reflect on that, and I will let you know what prize you get from the prize shelf at Chuck E. Cheese for being such a dedicated interviewee. So anyway, we're here. We have a little bit of a potential grab bag of topics. We'll see how we do on the first couple topics to see how many topics we hit. But the first topic we're going to talk about is the famed, long planned potential redevelopment of the police and fire stations right at the intersection of where Adams Morgan, U Street, and DuPont Circle come together. And as an Adams Morgan resident, I've been following this particularly closely, and I'm super curious. So why don't you fill folks in on the history, how we got here, and we'll go from there.
Sounds great. So right there in the corner of 17th and U and V, we have our aging fire and police stations, and it's time to renovate them and give them another long life at that location. But when we redevelop government property, we have a huge opportunity to do more than what's there right now. So the goal, the vision, is to build housing over top and possibly even some library services, which would fill in a gap in the Adams Morgan, U Street, DuPont area as well. So the journey started a couple years ago when the council worked on a comprehensive plan, which is like the blueprint for the city. And I passed an amendment that allows us to build taller, more densely on that site so that we can get the most out of it. And so the mayor's office moved that forward, and they applied to the zoning commission to be able to build something there. And the zoning commission just voted a few days ago to allow it to happen. This is really exciting. There is no project yet. There's just an opportunity now to actually build that housing. What's really cool about building on public land is the law that the council passed a few years ago requires that 1/3 of all the housing that's built on it has to be affordable. There may be more than 1/3 that ends up being affordable. It sort of depends. But with this project, because we also have to find the funding for renovating the fire and police stations, funds are going to be tight. So the good thing is that that law is in place. We have to follow that law to get that 1/3, but there's going to be hundreds of units of housing there. from 0 to hundreds of units. So that's really exciting for our community, I believe. And the next steps is that the mayor gets to begin the public process for input on what goes to that site and a request for proposals for developers to be our partner. And it's very exciting. I've never redeveloped a fire or police station before, so that part's new to me. And obviously there will be a lot of conversations with DC Fire, EMS, and MPD about what their needs are for that site. And some of those have already happened, but there's sort of a similar project in Foggy Bottom where the West End Library is. There's a library, fire station, and housing above. So if anybody is sort of having trouble picturing it, that would be a good example of what might go here. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, and like God bless the developer that takes that project on, because we also have a police station, obviously, like you said, in that same thing. So it will be quite a remarkable development and a lot of moving pieces, but like a real tribute to the neighborhood and to the city for putting together a project like that, because it's odd when you walk by the police and the fire station that it's like feels kind of like a missing tooth. It's the super flat buildings, and I think there are issues even with the garage. I'm not even sure the garage gets fully used. It seems like the police cars are parked more on the grass than in the garage. And you just look at that primo location where 3 of our best neighborhoods come together. And it, at least to me, it seems like it's a missed opportunity that will finally be maximized.
Right. And it's such a great location, as you mentioned, right there on U Street, abutting Adams Morgan. It's great access to bus, to amenities. People want to live in that area. And so creating opportunities for affordable housing in particular at that location will be really important because, our community is getting more expensive, and ensuring that affordability exists is part of it's one of the things we value in Ward 1. All the ANCs supported the project, which was really exciting. And well, I shouldn't say project, there's no project yet, but all the ANCs supported the zoning process, and I know they'll be heavily involved in the actual project as well. And I introduced legislation that sort of reminds the deputy mayor the importance of the public engagement process. They have a public engagement process they will kick off. And they did some of that before they did the zoning application as well. They had at least one, but I think more than one public meeting. But my legislation just would ensure that those occur. So just a little extra assurance for members of the community that are concerned their voices won't be heard.
Yeah, I mean, this project goes back so far. I was on the ANC personally. I was an ANC commissioner from 2000 to 2005. And while I can find no proof of it, I distinctly remember us suggesting to DC public libraries that a redeveloped police and fire station would be a great spot for, if they couldn't add an additional full library branch, at least a satellite branch or a partial branch, because it's one of the biggest library deserts in the city. And it's such a high density spot where key neighborhoods come together. And damn it, I wish I could find proof of that, because I remember it distinctly. But
well, I believe it. And I remember when you were on the school improvement team for Marie Reed that you raised that issue a lot too, just the library desert. There's a study going this year, DC Public Libraries is doing partially with funding that I put in the budget to do more of an assessment of need. Now, their assessment of need before COVID absolutely clearly said these 3 neighborhoods need library services. But the ways in which people are using libraries has changed a lot. And so they just want to make sure it's a good investment. But it's something that I have been talking about whenever I can with DC Public Libraries, with residents, because everybody loves the library. I can't imagine anyone saying, I don't want a library in my neighborhood. It hasn't happened yet in the 10 years I've been on the council. or the 4 years I was on the ANC. So we'll see. But I'm eager to get the results of that study they're doing. I think it's important to be data oriented and make sure that we're using government resources wisely. And also library services are awesome. So we should get some.
Absolutely. And as we know from the t-shirts and the tote bags, nothing is more punk than the public library.
For a period of time, we had the Fab Lab on U Street. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. That's calling back memories.
Yeah, it was in the Reeves Center, and now it's in its own permanent spot. But it was, people love the Fab Lab. You can go there and tinker and make things, 3D print.
So based on the data, so it's nothing's a sure thing, because like you're saying, it's not a project. There's just the upzoning, but it seems like there is a strong likelihood that if the data reflects a need for library services that there will be some kind of a library, DC Public Library foothold potentially in an eventual project. Is that fair to say?
I think it would then be wholly dependent on the funding identified, because we will be pushing for a long-term lease, not a sale of the land. And so whoever works with us on it is going to have to figure out how to make it profitable for them, because developers are business people. They need to at least not go broke doing the project. And so we will be looking at what's the value of the land. How does that, in a 99-year lease, what value can someone get out of that? I mean, there's people in the back room that do this kind of math that are not me, but the concept is, the phrase is making the deal pencil, making it pencil out. So we know that we have to find funds to do the police, fire, and then it would be library. So it's really the goal is, let's get the library services in the request for proposals that the deputy mayor puts out. Let's see what people come up with, and then figure out how much it'll cost to do. And we'll go from there. I can't think of a meeting I've had with the deputy mayor's office in the past 5 years where I haven't mentioned the library. So
yeah,
I think they've gotten the message, but there has been some turnover there. So it's always a good time to check in.
Absolutely. And I'm guessing because of the example of the West End, and then also, wasn't there also a co-location fire station location in Ward 6? I feel like
there is on Florida Avenue, maybe.
I don't remember which one it is, but I feel like that hopefully they figured out, because co-locating with living above a fire station, there's potential for noise issues and things like that. But I'm assuming they've worked those out, because you don't hear about people complaining about that in the.
Well, you have a fire station on your block. How is it?
It's glorious. It's surprisingly glorious. It's glorious to have the resource, but it is surprisingly low impact from a quality of life standpoint. That basically they don't put the siren on unless they get to the end of the block and need it to get people to move so they can get going. And I'm guessing something similar. Obviously, if the siren needs to go on, the siren needs to go on, and the residents will understand. But just a couple little ticks you can make to adjust things and make it easier. And I think it's surprisingly easy to live in close proximity.
In my office, I think I get more complaints from people whose block is getting visits from ambulances and fire trucks rather than ones that have them on their block. Because of course, if they're visiting your block, then they really probably have the lights and sirens on. So, but we have the fire station on U Street. There are people that live next door. We have the fire station on Sherman Avenue, and there's people that live next door. And then we have the one on 14th Street, which has a lot of people living near it, in addition to the one on Lanier by you. I don't think I'm missing one. Hopefully not. It's always a risk when you start listing things that you might forget one.
Right. Same thing to your Academy Award speech. You always want to be careful who you're thanking, because you'll forget someone. I haven't heard a lot of talk about the plan for where the fire, and I know this obviously hasn't been decided, but it's clearly been thought about, where the fire and police services will go during construction.
Right. I think we're still a little ways away from there, that moment in time, which is why it hasn't been figured out. The Department of General Services, which is our real estate division and our building division and our property management division, will be the ones that help figure out where to put them. Obviously, we want to make sure we don't create a gap in service, in particular for fire services. The police can really be anywhere because that's just their office. That's not where they're deploying from when they receive a call from 911. So, you know, we want them to be out and about, not sitting at a desk. So I think that could be in a few other places. And the third district itself is pretty expansive. So they could probably be even in a regular office building as long as the public can walk in. So yeah, we'll see.
And I mean, it's, you know, the DC is all about swing space. Like, I feel like that's like our second state motto. You know, that constantly everything's getting renovated and there's churn, and the school, you know, school kids are getting moved, I think, most often. But, you know, fire station, to your point, swing space is a little more complicated because of the access and big trucks and that kind of thing. But if they can do it on Lanier Place, they can do it pretty much anywhere.
State Bird is, right? The crane.
Oh, okay. I thought it was the Twitter bird, but it shows what I know.
It's the crane, get it?
No, I do.
Okay, you didn't need the hand motions. You got the joke. Okay.
Godspeed. Whatever works for you works for me.
This is audio, right?
Yeah. So speak about the affordable housing component, because I think that's critical, that, you know, that there's never going to be enough affordable housing. We need to do everything in our power to get there. And we have a unique opportunity on public land to, like you said, about the law in place, 30% to in a way, over provide on the spaces where we really can show how important it is to us as a priority. So talk a bit about that and about the income thresholds.
So this is interesting. So originally, the mayor's office of planning went to the zoning commission and asked for enough density to potentially build more than 500 units of housing total. A third of those would have been affordable. Recently, they went back to the zoning commission and said, we're going to tweak our application in a way that I would describe as negotiating against themselves. And so they reduced their request by about 175 fewer housing units overall, and about, you know, if you do the math there, that'd be about 52 fewer affordable units. And this was my main criticism of the decision by the zoning commission. You know, they heard a lot of testimony from folks who didn't want a tall building there, which happens every time. This is not something that we're not used to in the District of Columbia. The council had already said in the comprehensive plan there should be a setback. You know, on B Street, you have smaller houses. You don't want a towering building. We do this all the time architecturally. But unfortunately, this has sort of cast the die to reduce the number of housing altogether, which is really disappointing. But there's still going to be a lot of housing there. And it's a little dangerous to sort of play around and predict how many number of units will be, because one thing that we don't know yet is what size units they'll be. So will they be studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, you know, and obviously the size it is a determining factor in the number of units, because, you know, they have to go somewhere. So we'll see. But it's hundreds. It's not 50, it's hundreds. And a third of those will be affordable. So that is exciting. Now, when it comes to the income level, that is also to be determined. It has to be generally below 80% of the median family income, which is median family income in DC is a little over $100,000 for a family of four. So 80% of that would be making less than $80,000. But we usually do deeper affordability than that in these projects, either at 60% of the median family income or 50%. Sometimes we do 30% or below of median family income, but usually that's a project with additional subsidy, like a partnership with the housing authority, et cetera. Almost all of this will depend on, how many tax credits are available to the district at that time. What is the bond cap from the Housing Finance Agency? And what is our borrowing capacity at that time? And I will say, some of that may be impacted by who's president. And some of that will be impacted by the overall health of the district's finances, because our borrowing capacity is very much tied to that. So that is one of the reasons we work really hard at the council to ensure that we are budgeting responsibly and not running afoul of the guidelines that are out there on, debts, the debt cap and debt to income ratios and things like that. So all of that is highly technical stuff that'll be worked out by the mayor's team, but those are the factors that go into how much housing will there be, what type of housing will it be, as well as how much subsidy is available after the fact, because once the building is built, someone has to operate it in an environment where the cost of running a building is very expensive, and if incomes are not all market rate, typically some subsidy is applied to help with those operating expenses. So it all goes together.
Yeah, it's so complicated. I mean, it's, I guess, in a microcosm of any decision you have to make on government policy, that everything interacts, everything's interrelated. There's a push to generate as much housing as possible, as many units of housing as possible, but there's an extreme shortage of larger units. So if you check the larger units box, then you're providing less units of housing, which is hurting your other goal. But if you just try to hit your total housing goal and your total affordable housing goal, you end up with a ton of affordable studios, which are not useful to a ton of people and a ton of families.
Yeah, not as useful to families. I mean, still very helpful for, aging seniors, younger people, maybe people aging out of their parents' house that are residents here in the district that lived here their whole lives, things like that. So, we need all of it, but it has been important to focus on family-sized units as well. Those don't always get built in tall buildings. Sometimes those are townhomes, or houses themselves, just thinking about family size and not wanting folks to be living on top of each other in a 3-bedroom apartment, et cetera. But we get to do a lot more of that when we're partnering with the housing authority, because they do a 1-for-1 replacement of their units. And so, for example, Park Morton project over in Parkview, where I live, we're building 5s and 6s, because that's what the need is for the families. And those are great, but those tend to be townhomes or a different layout. One thing that I recently came across that I thought was really exciting is, okay, so the district is divided up into planning areas, and we live in Mid-City. Mid-City planning area is Ward 1 plus Bloomingdale and Eckington and Ward 5. So it's mostly Ward 1. We have more affordable housing production since 2019 of any other planning area west of the river, which is very cool.
Yeah, that is impressive.
We're number 2. Far southwest, southeast is number 1, and mostly Ward 8. But we are the number 1 west of the river, which is, it says something. I mean, you were on the ANC. I was on this ANC. You know how important ANCs are to ensuring housing gets built, because the projects come before them. More projects come to the ANC than ever come to the council, because we only have jurisdiction over the public development. And I think we've really seen a movement of people running for office as ANCs because they want more housing and more affordable housing, and they want their communities to remain diverse. And you can only do that by making them affordable. So we haven't solved it. That's not mission accomplished. But I think we should be proud that we really are leading in many ways in Ward 1 on building housing, and in particular building affordable housing. And we have so many more projects in the pipeline coming along. The work that we did on the comprehensive plan, which I mentioned right at the top of this interview, it wasn't just for that site. It's for the Reeve Center. It was for the Housing Finance Agency over at 9th and Florida. It was for a number of smaller parcels scattered throughout, ones owned by churches or nonprofits or private owners, but giving people the opportunity to build more housing on a site that they already own, or if they want to sell it, whatever. But that's called infill. We don't have a lot of open space, but we do have opportunities to build more housing on the space that we do have. So it's been very strategic, and it was a big priority of mine. And I'm really glad to see that. That's the last 5 years.
Yeah, I mean, and it seems like density is the cornerstone of that, because when you're in such a small ward, I live in a small apartment, and when you live in a small apartment, everything goes in its place, and there's no unused space. And if you can use a space for 3 things instead of 1 thing, you do it, and you need to.
You mean like a police, fire, and housing?
Exactly. Yeah. It's our coffee table like opens up and is full of old DVDs and VCR tapes, and it's like everything.
Probably get rid of those.
Yeah, I know. I do have a player, so I do watch them periodically. But yes, but it just proves that you can do all the things you need to do, even in a small, tight ward. But you just need to be creative and thoughtful. And how many things can you co-locate and stack in a reasonable, quality of life standpoint?
And persistent.
Doable. But I mean, it is a tribute that we've gotten there in a tough word to do it.
I agree. And you really do have to be persistent about it, because people don't like change, and people don't trust the government. And those are 2 pitfalls to building more housing. And all I can say is that hopefully people who don't believe the government actually cares about building affordable housing will see that data and understand that we are doing it. You don't have to trust us. You can just see our work and know that this is largely a concerted effort.
Let's talk for a minute, because I think we have to, about the dialogue about the project. I don't remember there being more dialogue and more heated, playful, interesting, satirical. I started the Adams Morgan listserv, and it is very much an uncontrolled space. It is the opposite of the Cleveland Park listserv, which is very useful and carefully moderated. The Adams Morgan listserv, for better or worse, is like the Wild West. We just let it go, because it's
thank you for your contribution to our society.
Well, it doesn't always feel like that, but some days it does. But talk a bit just about the dialogue. I mean, we've seen everything in the dialogue about this project. It's very Ward 1-ish, I think, to see the amount of historical references and just the richness of the dialogue and the comments.
Oh, sure. I mean, it's an interesting conversation. My constituents and I don't always agree, and I always just try to be respectful when that's the case. And that's not always reciprocated, but that's part of the job. So, there were some folks who live in the historic district just down the street who wanted to assert historic preservation rules on this site, which is not how it works. There were some folks that were concerned there just hasn't been enough dialogue for the neighbors, or even churches that are 5 blocks away haven't had the chance to weigh in, for example. There isn't much to weigh in on yet, but there was a lot of engagement at the zoning commission. And there were many, 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 many hours of testimony and hearings on this particular site. No, there were some people that said some not so nice things about me, which happens. And, there's been like massive FOIA requests about the process, etc. So from a government perspective, from my perspective, I don't actually find this to be super different from any of the other projects we've worked on public land where we are adding housing. Over here by me, Park Morton's been tied up for years in court. We are finally moving forward with the Bruce Monroe site because we have one in court, but it's some of the same things. People concerned about traffic, people concerned about more folks coming to the neighborhood. In this case, there was sort of a confusing argument that it wasn't enough affordable housing. It wanted to be 100%, that some people wanted it to be 100% affordable housing, which was maybe a little bit of a red herring. I'm not sure exactly who was saying that, but I have a sense that it was meant to be kind of a poison pill because we couldn't possibly build 100% affordable housing while also doing a fire and police station. And I think that was the point. If that was insisted upon, perhaps the project would die. But I don't assume I know people's motivations. I just know that this is important for our community. It has unanimous support in the government. And I think that we'll just have to prove to the neighbors that it's a great project once it's done.
Right. Yeah, the Harris Teeter and Adams Morgan came through the ANC when I was on the ANC, and you can almost write a Mad Lib of a opposing email to a project that is a big change, but presumably a positive change. I didn't hear about this. Why weren't there meetings? And anyone in the process, it's clear how many meetings have been held and how many discussions have been held on the listserv and posters have been up around the neighborhood. It's sometimes that's the last refuge, is the how could we know conversation. And I get that all people are busy, but
that's a challenging one. I think people don't like being taken by surprise, period. That's very human.
Right.
And it can be jarring to realize you've been out of the loop on something so different and significant in your neighborhood. I do think our government does a pretty good job of community engagement. There are many levels. One place that community engagement happens is at regularly scheduled ANC meetings with duly noticed agendas. That's a very consistent thing. So for people who are trying to stay in the loop on things like projects for housing or bus routes or bike lanes or any of that, you can almost always find that information by just checking the ANC agenda. They only meet once a month generally, and you have an opportunity. So I can't speak highly enough of the importance of keeping an eye on what's going on, but it's not limited to ANC meetings. Many of the departments have public meetings outside that space as well. Sometimes they flyer, depending on what the issue is. They post on lampposts. They put things out on listservs and on social media. So it is possible to be engaged on these things as a resident of the district, even if you're not someone who's been very involved in the past. It is important for all of our residents' voices to be heard. And that's one of the reasons that the government does this level of engagement. So I get it. If you weren't engaged on this earlier and it came to you as a surprise, you're gonna have a lot of feelings about that. But there's, on this particular site on U Street, many more meetings to come. some led by the mayor, some at the council. You know, there'll be lots of opportunities for input. So
And am I remembering correctly that the zoning commission passed this? It has one more stop and then it comes back to the zoning commission one more time. Is that right? Or did I?
That I don't know. Just trying to see. I thought it was done with them, but I could be wrong.
The second vote, that may have been the first vote, was the vote with the weight, and the second vote may technically happen, but be less weighty.
Got it. Oh yeah. Do they vote twice on everything? Like us?
Oh yeah, that it could be like a first reading, second reading thing. But anyway,
One of us should know this.
Correct. we will continue to follow this via the Adams Morgan listserv and its rich multiple satirical posts that are posted on this topic that I personally am a fan of. But we, I think, are starting to run shorter on time, but and the disadvantage of you having done so many interviews is you've run through all of the fun closing round stuff. So we're going to go to as if this were an elementary school classroom, and ask you, what are you doing this summer? Because I understand you have something particularly fun, cool, and a surprising element of it that we should know about.
Well, Josh, next week I will be answering only to the name Indigo, which is my camp counselor name at Camp Brighton Woods. So for those of you who grew up here in the area and participated in Girl Scouts, you might have gone to Brighton Woods. This is a day camp. It's a 2-week camp, but I only can be a counselor for 1 week this year. And I'm going to be there with both my daughters, Zoe and Madeline. Zoe is a rising brownie, and I will be a counselor to the daisies, including one daisy who is in our troop that I'm a leader of. And then Madeline will be in the Pixie group, which is a group for children of counselors who aren't yet old enough to be Girl Scouts. And we're gonna go to camp every day and have a blast and come home tired and sleep well. And I think it's going to be a great experience. I am trying to shake off a cold because that's not a great experience, is managing, 25 kindergartners with a cold. God bless our teachers. But I'm psyched. I'm going to wear a bandana on my head every day. Try not to get any ticks. It'll be fun.
And is it still like arts and crafts and archery and like, or am I showing my age? Is that like?
No, all of that. I mean, it's in the woods. There's literally archery, arts and crafts. This camp doesn't have swimming. There's traditions at camp. They have 4 different mascots that are part of the camp's origin story, and you have to capture the mascots, like a flamingo, a frog. Can't remember all of them, but it's fun. I mean, if you're a camp person like me, it's fun.
Yeah, I mean, this is a tell of age. Is I remember us making ashtrays in arts and crafts at camp.
I did that too in 5th grade. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Thankfully they don't do that anymore.
Nobody even smoked in our house. My parents were like, "What are we supposed to do with this?"
Yeah, exactly. Put loose change in it or jewelry or something.
Exactly. It's a jewelry tray.
But if I heard correctly, there is a cell phone ban at camp. Is that true?
Well, more or less. I have my cell phone for safety reasons. I'm not going to take my government cell phone because I'm not supposed to be checking my phone. And I'm also managing teen counselors who are not allowed to have their phones. And so we're trying to model good behavior and not be on our phones and give our full attention to the children. And so I'll have it for emergencies along with my walkie-talkie. And, the good people of the Ward 1 staff team will help me monitor my email and make sure we get all our constituent services handled.
And is the opportunity to have an excuse to not be super present on your phone, are you going to have the jitters from not being able to do it? Are you going to be the most grateful person on earth for having a reasonable excuse not to do it for a short time? What are your emotions as you go into this phoneless phase?
I have observed that preparing to be away from my work email for a week has been pretty stressful because it's sort of like I got to get everything clear out of my inbox and can't just get to some of it on Monday. I haven't really gone dark on a vacation, which this is not, since my honeymoon. I mean, I didn't even go dark when I was in labor, because you got to do something while you're in labor. Check email, respond to constituent requests. But yeah, I'm not suggesting that that's a healthy behavior for anybody who's trying to figure out work-life balance. But in this job in particular, I try to stay connected because people sometimes write me with urgent needs. So yes, we did go dark on our honeymoon. And by the way, there was one interruption to that, and it was the chairman.
And I think I know better than to ask for any more detail than that. But
yeah, I didn't even have my phone on at all. No, my office called my husband to be like, the chairman needs the council member. We were like, we're in Hawaii. Are you serious? Anyway, he probably didn't know.
Yeah.
I don't think he would have called to interrupt the honeymoon on purpose.
Right. That's what we're gonna go with. But Ed, so any other big summer plans, or is this the apex?
We're gonna actually do a vacation in Michigan, which will be nice. And then we're gonna go to Niagara Falls on the way back. And I can't remember if we've talked about this much, but my husband served in the army in Afghanistan, and we helped his friends and colleagues get out of Afghanistan when it fell to the Taliban a few years ago, and they have settled in Canada. And I'm going to get to meet them for the first time when we go to the falls, and so will the girls.
Wow, that's going to be awesome.
I think so too. So I'm pretty psyched.
Yeah, combining the emotional awesomeness of the meeting with the natural awesomeness of the falls. That's
exactly. So
and throwing on the poncho and riding the Maid of the Mist and all that stuff.
The Maiden of the Mist.
Yeah, it's cheesy but awesome. I did it when I was, I think, 13 and still remember it. So
love it.
But well, anyway, thank you again so much for being generous once again with your time. And listeners, if you can remember to subscribe to our podcast on SoundCloud or wherever you get your podcasts, just search under Hearing the Council. Thanks again for joining us. Tune in next time. We're on DC Radio at 96.3 on your FM HD4 dial or at dcradio.gov. I'm Josh Gibson. This is not a council hearing. This is Hearing the Council. Thanks, Councilmember. Have a great summer.
Thanks, you too, Josh.